Ask someone to picture a ballet dancer, and posture is probably the first thing that comes to mind. That effortless, upright poise. It's one of the most recognizable hallmarks of the art form, and something we all strive to achieve. Today's episode is part of our ongoing series with Chelsea Weidmann, also known as the Geeky Ballerina, where we unpack specific elements of artistry as she identified and explored them in her thesis on artistry in ballet. In today's conversation, we're digging into the fundamentals of ballet posture and what it allows us to accomplish as dancers. We also get into the difference between posture that's technically correct but reads as flat, and posture that reads as intentional and alive. And for dancers who perform, Chelsea shares how a character's posture can shift over the course of a ballet and how you can use those nuances to support your artistry. If you've ever wanted your posture to look more confident and effortless, or wondered how you can use it to support your artistry, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Hello, Chelsea. Welcome back to another episode. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
Doing good. I'm excited. This is number, let's see, this is always a test. I think it's 6. I think this is number
I
6.
think it is. It's either 6 or 7. I think we have 2 more to go. I think this is our
Okay.
7.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We never know for sure. We're just we're just taking life as it comes over here. We just jump on, hit record, and
See what happens.
yeah, see what happens. But yeah, so today
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about posture, which is a large part of ballet training. I think that's one of the biggest things that I had to work through and that I also hear adults talking about in the classroom is just like the posture of ballet and how nuanced all of the little details about posture are. So maybe we could start like we always do with defining our terms according to your research. What is posture?
Yeah. Posture is just the habitual alignment of the body. It has a lot of value judgments, good posture, bad posture, but it's completely dependent on what you're doing. So ballet posture is fantastic for ballet, completely not useful in other areas of your life. So we're just going to breathe out, no value judgments. Posture is just the habitual alignment that a body takes.
Yeah. So in terms of ballet posture, because like you touched on, it is very unique to ballet. And I would love to get into like what are the fundamentals of ballet posture from a technical standpoint. So I don't know if it's helpful to go from like head to toe, top to bottom, however you want to do this.
Okay, I start at the pelvis when I work with people on alignment. And this is my bread and butter. Okay. When people figure out how to do this on their own, I will need a new career. So start with the pelvis. The goal is to align the pelvis in as neutral a way possible. Some people will get really upset if you call it a neutral pelvis. They will say that there isn't such a thing. The goal is to get your ASIS and your PSIS, I will give better words for those in a second, as level as that skeleton is able to. So your ASIS is your hip bones in the front, and your PSIS is basically your hip dimples in the back, your SI joint. Most people's hands are big enough that they can put their longest finger on their hip bone and their thumb will just about reach that hip dimple.
Mm-hmm.
So we can kind of get a good idea of how level we are from there. And then some people use a mirror to help them. Other people use their somatic awareness. We already did an episode on that if you want to hear about that. But we want to get that as level as possible. Most people are in what's called an anterior tilt, which means the front tilts downward. This is because we sit a lot, our hip flexors are tight. And the reason that we want those 2 points level is because then the space that is inherently built into your pelvis, in the front of your pelvis, is now fully available so that your femur can rotate. You have opened up the most turnout that your body has. If we stay tilted downward, we've closed that off, and now we are fighting ourselves forevermore. But once you have your pelvis pretty consistently in the general area where you think it belongs, because progress, not perfection, the next is the waistline, right? This is the lift that we want. Everybody lifts in the shoulders because we are used to that action. That's not actually what we want. That makes it harder to breathe. The lift that we want through the waist, we're actually using, so each little vertebrae stacks, and each little vertebrae has muscles that connect it to the one below it or the one above it. And we want to use those muscles to get taller.
Jumping back, because obviously this whole series is about artistry and the elements that make that up and why they're important. So why specifically is posture an element that you decided to incorporate in breaking down this concept of artistry?
I love that question because posture is the element of artistry I have gone back and forth on the most. Partly because it is the most entwined with the technique. There are limits to what we can do with our posture and still be doing ballet technique.
Yeah.
And it just seems so inherent. And it is so subtle. And I'm like, well, if I took it out, then I would only have 8 elements of artistry, and that's 4 for each book. And then that would be awfully balanced. And the OCD in my brain really likes that idea. But I keep it in because I think the subtlety is the gift. If we all only stand one way, then we are losing shades of individuality, shades of characterization. So, for example, like the pelvis and the waist, they stay unless you're doing something very, very contemporary. But if you are dancing a character that is more introspective, there's a little bit of a softness in the shoulders, like just right almost underneath the collarbones, because your focus is inward and the upper part of your body will show that. Whereas if you are, I'm thinking Kitri right now, and you're just like very confident, that naturally opens up a little bit more. The lift in the sternum, it doesn't change a lot, but if we think of it as locked down, then we just had like the tension that is required to lock that into one place, it carries up into our neck. And then that like is not great because you can't spot. So I've kept it because it's a tiny difference that has ripples throughout the body.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like you said, it is so tied into technique. And I think when people think of ballet, a lot of what they're thinking of is the posture. When they think of what is a ballerina, it's like it's the posture that's really what even sets it apart, I think, from other forms of dance. There's something that's very it's like a hallmark of ballet, how you carry, and there is some that, translates even with differences in characters. I mean, obviously, there's gonna be extremes of, like, yeah, if you're, like, playing a hunched old woman, there's gonna be a difference, but as far as, main character type energy, you think of, like, what principal dancers are gonna be dancing between, Kitri, Giselle, Sleeping Beauty. There is a consistent thread of posture that is ballet. But
Yeah.
I think it is, like we were saying earlier, it's one of the hardest things, I think, to start learning and to start adapting to as an adult coming into the studio with a lot of ingrained habits of
Hmm.
how it's comfortable for us to move through life, whether it's because we're on our phone or we're at a computer or just the differences in how our anatomy is, that obviously hugely contributes to posture is just anatomy. And I think another thing too that is surprising and probably frustrating as a beginner, like I know it was frustrating for me, is you think that it's something you should be able to just click over into, but it takes years to really develop ballet posture. It's such a bummer because it just takes so much longer than you want it to. But one of the things that I would love to get your take on, because you have been dancing and teaching for a long time, is what is the function of ballet posture specifically? Like, what does it allow us to accomplish as dancers that we couldn't otherwise? Because I think, like myself, a lot of adults like to understand the why of why we do certain things. And you touched on it with the pelvis of like the opening helps with there's more ability to rotate in the socket and things like that. So are there other functional reasons for ballet posture?
Yes, ballet and ballet posture cannot be separated because ballet started as a way for people to demonstrate that they belonged in the king's court. And the social mores of the day were that people who were fit to rule, people that God had deemed fit to rule, were very upright. People of lesser standing deserved to be of lesser standing. Notice the past tense. I'm not advocating any of this, but just the hunching over that, hi, we all have because we all work. Hundreds of years ago, they all had because they all worked too. The people who didn't have to work because they were like, ooh, pay me your taxes, right? The upright posture, because of the power inherent in the court and the fact that the court chose ballet, the technique and the posture grew up together. And you just can't have ballet without the posture. What the ballet posture has given us is a very concentrated center line. So, and I talk about the center line and the midline as two different things. The midline is on the outside of your body. The center line goes through your body as if I think we talked about this in the line episode.
Yes.
So the center line goes through your body as if you were a merry-go-round horse. And the more you have your ballet posture, it's almost like, I love the image of, imagine that like your toes are these 5 thin ribbons, and then they start rotating externally around your ankles, and they braid into 2 ribbons that go all the way up into your hips, and then they start going around your spine. You have these ribbons almost like helixing around your spine at this point, because everything is very concentrated around that center line. And then you can put that center line, your aplomb, equal between your base of support, which is the square inches taken up by your feet. And then the challenge in the point work is that we've gone from, I don't know how wide feet are, like, what is that, like 2 inches, 3 inches? I don't know, to suddenly 1 inch. And so your base of support is so much smaller that sense of aplomb has to be, or learns to be, just dead on. And that's where all of this, that sense of lift that comes from taking the pelvis out of the tilt, the lengthening through the sides of the waist, the awareness of the lift, but not the splay through the thoracic spine, all of that you've been building creates the lift that you need, that then gives you the freedom in your mind to think like down into the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's like ballet posture might not be good for much outside of the ballet studio, but it is great in the studio and especially with pointe shoes on. It's really good with your pointe
Yes.
shoes on.
In
But
fact, I am about to do point evaluations for this coming academic year, and I am about to have this conversation with a handful of parents that I know want their kid on point, and I know it's not time yet. And consistently, every single one of them, it's not their work ethic, it's not their attendance, it's not ankle mobility, it's not even like their therabands. It's that their posture and alignment is not yet where it needs to be to do the technique. And it's going to have a ripple effect either up the chain into your neck or down the chain into your feet, ankles, knees, and hips. So yeah, the posture and the technique cannot be separated.
for adults in the studio who are looking to achieve ballet posture, I think one of the things that can be frustrating is that there's a version of having, quote unquote correct ballet posture, but it's still like not quite there. Like you're checking the main boxes, but there still isn't the full look of like a principal dancer, that extra little bit. So what goes into the kind of posture that reads not as just like technically correct, but reads as alive and polished in a way that like we would see on stage with a prima ballerina.
The big difference, once you've got the skeleton aligned, the big difference comes from inside. The thing that principals dancers have that sometimes even core to ballet members don't have is a sense of groundedness that they belong in the room. Someone else's success does not take away from theirs. And when those two things combine, that I think is what the difference is, because until we reach that point, we are performing that we belong. We are trying to convince our I don't just me, maybe just me, trying to convince myself that I am good enough to be in the room instead of letting myself know that I am good enough to be in the room. That reads.
Yeah, I think it's like a mix
Not
of
finished that thought.
confidence and joy. I think that's what I've observed. I'm not that's definitely not something I feel like I've achieved, but I think in observing dancers who have that little bit of extra that like translates into beautiful carriage and posture, I think it's this mix of confidence in who they are and what they bring to the table, whether that's like in performing or just in their dancing. Because even just in watching principal dancers in class, it's like it's there even in class. It's not necessarily just a stage thing, but I think it's the confidence of what they bring to the table and then also just like the joy of dancing. And I think
Mhm.
both of those you see it shine through. And I know we've talked about this in other elements. I think there's a lot of technical pieces to each of these elements, but there's also a lot of mindset pieces to each one. And I think posture is also a big one of how you feel about yourself a lot of times comes through in our posture just in life in general, but speaking specifically within the ballet studio, if we're feeling insecure about our dancing, our posture tends to reflect that. Whereas if we can push through some of our own mental blocks to experience a little bit more confidence or even joy, like even if you can't access confidence, accessing, I'm so glad to be here and so grateful to be here. I think that oftentimes that does something to our posture in and of itself. So it is interesting. Like, I
Mhm.
think this is another one where there's a mental component.
For sure. And I want to build on what you said about um, being grounded in like what you bring as a performer or what you bring as a dancer. For a lot of for hopefully all adults, we bring more into the studio than just our dancing, than just our bodies. And so if you're not feeling like you bring anything, as maybe someone listening to this is thinking about signing up for their first class, you should totally do it. Sign up for six. Sign up for six because it takes a minute
Yeah.
to, yeah, it does, it works better. But bring like everybody's good at something, right? Like maybe you're an amazing gardener. You've already made the world a more beautiful place. Maybe you are a computer programmer. You've already made the world a more beautiful place because guess what? I don't know how to program a computer, so thank you, right? Maybe maybe you're a bookkeeper. You've already made the world a more easeful place just by doing that. So all of these things that we think, oh, artists do this, they're so great. Everyone who comes in already comes in having brought something into the room. And so in those moments where you feel like you aren't good enough, you don't have anything to prove. You walked in the door and it was already true.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So in terms of performing, because as we've talked about in past episodes, a lot of adults are getting more opportunities to perform, which I think is so great. And you talk in your research about how a character's posture can shift and evolve over the course of a ballet. So I think of, ballets like Giselle specifically, where there's a certain type of posture and body carriage at the beginning of the ballet and then tragedy and it changes. So for adults who are performing how can we approach using posture to support and convey artistry in the context of a performance or a recital?
Yeah, this is a great question. Let's start with Giselle because I have if you try to make classical ballets make sense, you're going to have issues with all of them, which is super fun. So, at the beginning of the ballet, she's very innocent. She's completely innocent. And so, as adults, we can think back to like your first crush, right? And it was very naive, I think is the right word. It was very optimistic, right? And we're like so in love and a lot of that. And we have a lot of openness and freeness through the shoulders and the upper body. And then during the mad scene, mad, like anger is a really difficult emotion to convey through dance because usually when we are angry, we have lost control. And when we are dancing for safety reasons, we need to have control.
Yes.
I think that's part of why it's choreographed to have her hair come down is we're like, we gotta lose something here.
Yeah.
Um, but even then the posture becomes wilder. It becomes farther, not very far, but farther from the academic posture because that's where the character is. And then the curtain goes down and I'm so grateful I've never had to perform the title role because I don't know how the principal would do this because you have to go from innocent and optimistic to just thrashing with grief. And then the curtain rises, and all of a sudden, you have forgiven the man who proposed to you, knowing he was engaged to someone else. Not only have you forgiven him, you have forgiven him so much that you're going to dance all night long and be a protective shield between him and the fate he, quite frankly, probably deserves.
So
And at the same time, now that you are no longer in the land of the living, you also appear to have this sense of wisdom that only comes to people who are very self-actualized or outside of time. So there's this sense of calm. It blows my mind, which I
yeah.
think is part of why we love to watch it, right? Is because all of a sudden there's this person embodying and the lift gets much more stable. And I think that's part of what conveys the sense of inner stability.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going to do 2 acts of Giselle, more power to you. Most of us are doing like a piece. Well, okay, so let's look at Nutcracker. Like maybe you get to be a snowflake and in the Waltz of the Flowers. So in that case, like even if you were going to draw them, if you're drawing a snowflake, you're using straight lines. Well, that's a cue to you are not going to give very much in your posture at all. Whereas if you're drawing a flower, there's going to be some loopy lines in there somewhere. Anything above about the bra line. So for gentlemen, that's about like the bottom of your sternum. If you go directly behind it, that's about the bra line. That's where you can start to loosen up more if you were going to be a flower.
For someone listening, I know we have a lot of beginners that listen to the podcast. When they're in the classroom and they're hearing different cues or even different corrections about posture, different things, what is the difference between posture and épaulement? Because I think that that might be confusing for some people. So can you talk about the nuance of
Yeah.
what differentiates those two things?
Yes. Épaulement means shouldering. And if you have trouble remembering that, it's like the epaulettes from like the military or fashion, right? It is just a very slight spiral through basically the shoulder and collarbone. And then on top of that, we often will let the neck spiral to complement it, but it's built on the alignment that we already have. So your pelvis doesn't move. Your waist isn't going to change. Your sternum doesn't change a lot. It changes a little. Like if I put like a sticker, obviously I have a lot of stickers in my dance bag, but if I put a sticker on my sternum and I started adding the shouldering in, it would move a little bit, but it's coming from the shoulders, not coming from the sternum. If it comes from the sternum, it's more rotational and a bigger movement. Also, épaulement is always counter-directional. Your shoulders are always going in two different directions. So if your right shoulder is going to pull forward, it's your left shoulder is going to pull back in the same amount. That also comes in when you get into allongé. A lot of people, especially at the bar, as they allongé one arm, the opposing shoulder will try to come with it.
Yeah.
And what you want is both shoulders are lengthening, bless you,
Mhm.
even if only one arm moves.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a helpful distinction because I think that that is one of those things that can be confusing, especially when you're starting out and you're walking into God knows what type of class. I mean, some adults walk into an open class because that's all they have,
Yeah.
and you're getting hit with like, okay, épaulement, but I thought that posture was this way, so I think it's really important to distinguish terms because I think
Yeah.
that that's one of the really confusing parts of being an adult beginner specifically is like all of these really, really little details that are different but are overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and in teaching kids, I don't cover épaulement until level 4.
Yeah.
Just because we need time for other details. So if it hasn't clicked yet, that's okay. You're not behind and you're certainly not slower than anybody else.
Yeah.
There's just a lot. It's whack-a-mole.
It's
And
fuckable.
that's not the first mole you should whack.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that that's one of those things where, like, especially if you are in more of an open level class and you are needing to choose your battles, so to speak. I think,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Épaulement is, like, not one that I would say out the gate that you need to get super hung up on or worried about.
You did bring up something I think is really great because when you talked about like an open class where you have every level,
Yeah.
my gut instinct was to be like, oh, that's not ideal. But then as we talked about it, I realized, you know what? It's not bad because, okay, in terms of let me hand you information in digestible packets, I'm so sorry, that's not going to happen. But the great thing about open class is that you get to see everything and a lot of ballet is picked up by osmosis.
Mhm.
So if you are a beginner in an open class, don't think about the épaulement, don't worry about it. But if you happen to just naturally develop it, don't discount it as work you haven't done, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just another way to learn. And every ballet class is an opportunity to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, it's one of the reasons I I don't love it, but I try to intentionally be taking classes that I know are above my level on a somewhat regular basis because I think there's a lot of value in watching the dancers around you. Actually, I just took a class last weekend where I was like, oh, but there was a girl in it who I think she had to have been maybe a professional freelancer or former professional who was just gorgeous to watch, and I felt like I got so much out of that class just in terms of watching her out of the corner of my eye
Yeah.
because there's just so many little nuances that you can see in someone and be like, "Oh, I like that. I wanna try that."
Yeah.
And I think it's another we've talked, in other episodes about even just the benefit of watching ballet on YouTube and really watching dancers who are, like, at the top level and trying to absorb some of that essence that can be kind of hard to put your finger on, especially, like we talked about with posture, like, there's all the technical things, and then there's, like, that little extra something, and I think
Yeah.
watching people that are at the top of their game and who really just have that incredible sense of artistry when you watch them, it's a great way to pick it up. So
Mhm.
what are there ways that you think I know we've done this in other episodes, and I think it can be helpful for people walking into their next class of like, do you have examples of ways that we could be working on posture like the next time we step into the studio, whether we're beginner, intermediate, advanced? Are there things that you recommend thinking about or being conscious of in the classroom setting?
I always come back to pelvis. It is all about getting the pelvis where it belongs.
Yeah.
And so more than, hey, let's think about this in class, it's let's do some work at home to set ourselves up for success. So, um, are we stretching our hip flexors a little bit? are we doing a couple of 30-second planks? Like 30-second planks, 30-second planks, 5 days a week for 4 weeks will transform your dancing. It's like it just will. And they can be modified on your knees. You can be on your elbows. And yeah, doing the work before class, or even if you get to class 5 minutes early, do a 30-second plank and then stretch your hip flexors. The more time we spend with our pelvis where it needs to be, the more our brain registers this as home base. And it just makes it easier. Yeah. I feel like that's a dissatisfying answer, though.
It's not, though, because I think like it's so true. And it's been so true for me with someone who has a lot of anterior pelvic tilt naturally and tends to have my trainer calls it duck butt, our butt kind of sticks out a little bit. And I had a lot of duck butt just naturally, and it was fine in salsa dancing. So it was never something I worked on because it didn't matter. Getting into ballet, it was the correction that I just got all the time was like just having, too much of that tilt. And the thing that has changed so much for me, or the thing that has changed that so much for me, has been incorporating core work. And it's so funny because now it's like, if I get to class and I have 60 seconds to warm up, the thing I'm doing is a plank. I do an exercise my trainer gave me. They're called turtle planks, where you're on your elbows and your knees and you're intentionally rounding your back. It's almost like thinking of it as like a reverse sit-up. Now it's like I can't start class without it because I immediately get that sense of engagement in my core that helps get my pelvis into neutral. And I do think that more so than anything really that was happening in the course of a ballet class, that is what has gotten my alignment and my posture into the, correct ballet posture. So yeah, I think core work planking is such a good one. It's not like a glamorous one, but it's a really effective one.
Nothing that helps your ballet is glamorous.
Yeah.
It does not get glamorous until you put the tutu on.
Thank you so much for being here, Chelsea. How can people stay connected to your work?
The best way to stay connected with me is through my newsletter and my blog. Those are both on my website, geekyballerina.com.
So I will put all of Chelsea's information in the show notes so that you can subscribe to her newsletter. It is fantastic, and follow her on Instagram. So that'll be in the show notes for you guys. Make sure you check it out. And thank you, Chelsea, so much for being here. I had so much fun.
Thank you. Always fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really helps more adult dancers find the podcast. All the links and resources we mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want more adult ballet content in between episodes, come hang out with me on Instagram @thebusybunhead. See you next week after class.